Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Fiends podcast, where we discuss everything fantasy. I am Stevie Collier, and I'm here with my co-host Andy Peliquin, author of the Last Fusilari series and Queen of the Knights Guild series. That's the series, right?
No,
Is that the title?
Queen of Thieves is the series. Queen of the Night Guild is the last book.
Oh,
which is coming in
Jesus.
January.
Okay. I get confused a little bit.
Is this podcast going to be a platform to discuss the way your hair style is evolving continually, or is that for after the after show?
I was wondering if you're going to bring it. You bring up my hair every time. It's the same. Okay, it's the same haircut. I know I was looking like a Wookiee there for a long time, but I go to the same barber. She trimmed up the beard. She shaved the sides, but we kept the top long. She just trimmed everything, made it look nice. I'm going to take this as a compliment that I just look good every time I'm on the show.
Well, seeing as your head's literally the only thing that we see,
I don't know how to change that.
No. As in it's a podcast, so it's basically two talking heads.
Oh, okay, yeah. See,
so that's all we get to see of each other, and sort of, that's the source of our entertainment.
Thank God I'm so damn handsome then. That's probably why we get so many viewers. And we are here today with our guest author, Rosemary Johns, and she is the author of Blood Dragons, which is a dark fantasy steampunk. And if you can't see the book. Do you have the books with you, Rosemary, by chance? The paperback?
Oh, that was foolish. I should do, shouldn't I? I can nip in a second and get them, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're really cool book covers. I also like that they're like color coded. So you have the first is red, then it's blue, then it's green. Very, very professional work. Oh, I didn't even know she left. Oh yeah, that's a thick book too. Very nice. Oh, I thought it was going to be a short story since you said you wrote a lot of professional short stories.
Yeah, those gears definitely scream steampunk, which is cool.
I like the fire. And I see you.
Each one has like different fire and a different London skyline on them. So you've got St Paul's or you've got London Bridge, and then obviously a different element to it. So because obviously each one's set in London.
Actually, I was lucky enough to visit London a couple of years back, and it was probably one of the best places I visited with my tour of Europe. So I just found that people were not only nice, but overly nice. And it's just a beautiful city. The architecture was awesome. And I love the history. I didn't know like half of London burned down. I didn't know that. So it was interesting to go through all those. And I went on the Jack the Ripper tour. That was super cool too. So,
yeah,
I mean,
my dad's a Londoner. So, yeah, London's really important to me. So
I thought you were going to say your dad is Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, the great twist is my dad.
Yeah. I'm like picking up my phone to call 911. And are you an actress as well? I know you're a playwright. We can talk about that later.
I was when I was younger, and I ran a theatre company and I directed. But then I found writing the actual plays was far more interesting.
Well, I'm asking because I see you have a professional headshot done for your Authors Central page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do sort of photo shoots. That was from an urban photo shoot that I did, which was really interesting.
That's cool. So do any of us have something cool for the week? Andy?
Well, yeah, definitely. On Friday, in 2 days, my short story collection, Different Not Damaged, is coming out.
Oh, awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really excited about that one because it's I finally get to tell the stories of like PTSD and autism, Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, like disabilities in a fantasy world, which is something that I really enjoy doing.
I know you've been super excited to finally get this one out, and I know it's something you're passionate about. And if you don't know anything about Andy, it's that he does a ton of research for his books. A ton, right, Andy?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
that's like your half of your day job too, is, you know, writing these blog posts and doing the research for these other companies. I believe it was Brandon Sanderson said your writing gets better the more research that you do and the older that you get, because you have more experiences to talk about.
Yeah.
And I know I always bring up the negatives of my writing, but that's one of the negatives. You know, I don't have so much experience. You know, like I was writing about, I'm writing a gay character now, and that's when I realized I know nothing about homosexuality. So that is something, Andy, actually, I wanted to talk to you. If you have any homosexual friends, I need their email address so I can awkwardly ask them to read the dialogue.
They're gonna think you're asking for their email address for a totally different reason.
Oh, geez. Just tell them I'm taken. Rosemary's like, what did I stay up and get myself into tonight? And
our poor unsuspecting victims never know what hit them, which is why I've started saying the guest adventurers, sort of like they wander into the den of the giant and the gnome, and they're sort of hapless. You know, I have this picture of, you know, this massive monster and this little gnome sidekick, and the hapless adventurer wanders in and is just kind of, oh my god, what did I get into for an hour?
This none of this was covered in the guest packet I received last week.
That would actually be a really awesome image, like to have as the cover for our YouTube channel or Facebook, is this giant and this gnome sitting around a campfire, and then a guest adventurer sort of stumbling in with like, what the hell's going on? Look, like, on their face.
Big eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And real quick, just to add to your Different Not Damaged book coming out, everybody knows I'm really big into book covers, and Andy, it's such a cool book cover with the skull and the colorful brain. Good choice on that as well.
Thank you. I had very little to do with the cover. That was covers by Christian. He did an amazing job on that one.
Yeah, he is a very talented cover artist. I've seen a lot of his stuff online, and affordable as well. So, Rosemary, did you have anything cool happen to you this week? Anything interesting?
Yeah, well, the second book in the Rebel Vampires series, which is, I'm going to probably hold it upside down again, like I did before, Blood Shackles. This one's on Halloween sale for this one coming up. So that's, I think it's just like 99 cents in America. But yeah, so that big Halloween, because that's the scary one, the most scary one in the series. Why that's
so
Halloween.
Book 2 is the scary one.
Book 2 is, well, so I've been told, as a writer yourself, it's sometimes hardest to know, but that's probably the most intense one. That's the one in which the vampires become the prey, because they're kind of the predators in the first book. In the second one, it all gets turned on its head and they become the prey.
Yeah.
And the humans are actually far more frightening than the vampires are.
Yeah,
so that's definitely the most frightening one, I think. Certainly, actually, that the readers think that's the most frightening one. So it's definitely the most Halloweeny.
Most Halloweeny.
Most Halloweeny. Hence,
that's
the
awesome.
one on Halloween sale. Yeah. But that was really interesting. Was saying about all the diverse things of autism and PTSD and your gay characters, because that's exactly what I write and that's exactly what's in my book. So I just, that's so fascinating.
Yeah, I was inspired to write the homosexual character in my book because I just finished Kings of the Wild a couple months back. Andy knows I'm a big fan of the book. And the reason why is because it's one of the first pieces of work that I've either watched or read that there was a gay character in it. It says one line, he's homosexual, and then that's it. He's not flamboyant, he's not bouncing around, he's not kissing guys. No, he's gay. That's it. He had a husband, he died. That was it. And I was like, you know what? I want to do something like that as well. I'm trying to add more, I would say, difficult elements to my books instead of just fight, violence, war. Doing the Fantasy Fiends podcast, I'm trying to add more intense themes to my book. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's definitely something that's good for you for all of us as a writer, is to push ourselves. And sometimes it's introducing new settings. Like a lot of contemporary authors will write a fantasy because it's challenging their ability to build worlds. For us, we're so used to building worlds and these cultures and all these things. That's not really the challenge. In many cases, the challenge is to create new characters or new settings that force us to stretch ourselves as a writer, whether it's by doing more research or by trying to understand a totally different group of people. You know, I wrote a female character, and I'm not a woman. How am I supposed to know that? I'm a 6.5-foot guy, and my character is 5'3". You know, it's just like stretching yourself as a writer, and by writing new things, pushing yourself. And that's why I've enjoyed these disabilities so much, is that it's forced me to think like these people. You know, I don't know how to understand someone with PTSD, so doing the research to get into what makes PTSD so affecting the people who suffer from it helps me to understand them as a whole group of people, which then translates into more, like better relations with the real life people. So that's sort of the way that we as writers can continue to stretch ourselves. Obviously, there's the whole marketing side of things, but really the challenge is to tell better, deeper stories.
And I agree.
In my opinion.
In Blood Shackles, the book, my vampire has PTSD. Well, it doesn't say he does, but he clearly does, because he's recovering from things that occurred to him when he's trained as a slave. And it's kind of the same thing, because often you read these stories where in fantasy or in paranormal, they go through these really shocking events, but then authors go, oh yeah, and a week later they're fine. And it was kind of my reaction to that, is go, hold on a second. It's wanting to have that deeper concept of psychology and wanting to then translate that into fantasy, or actually anxiety or depression or PTSD or whatever, and actually properly put that into books. How in real life are people broken? And then how are they put back together, and then what impact does that actually properly have? And actually, as you said, properly researching that and then properly writing that. And as you said, it's that challenge, rather than just these exciting plot things are happening, and isn't this thrilling? And then a week later, or even a book later, oh, they're all fine again, and now the next story happens.
Yeah, that actually ties really nicely into this world's into this week's topic, which is challenging the small lies. And I was really happy you suggested this one, because it is so interesting to look at these things that we've come to accept as normal, but in the context of fantasy or sci-fi. Like today I was talking with someone about the female Doctor Who. Like, in the classic Doctor Who, the original, that they said if you were born a Time Lord as a male, you could never change to become a female. And yet the new Doctor is a female. And I'm interested to see it. Number one, to see how the actor does, but also because it's changing things up. It's challenging this assumption, this concept that the Doctor is a man. When for humans, sure, male and female gender are maybe, more specific, but for an alien race that is really just shape-shifting to look like a human, the concept of gender is totally different. They may be, man and the Ooga Booga, like it could be anything.
So, Ooga Booga.
I know, I couldn't think of a clever sci-fi name.
Ooga Booga.
And the reaction from everyone was so interesting on it. It had such an extreme reaction. I don't know if it did in America. In Britain, the reaction to it was so extreme that a woman had been chosen.
Was it a good thing?
Oh,
or
no,
a bad
bad.
thing?
Well, it was mixed, but it was bad. I mean, it had such an extreme reaction from people against a woman having been chosen. And then there was an extreme reaction against the fact that it had been bad. So you had two reactions. I think
the majority of people saw this as progress, but the most vocal people saw this as bad. So then the first outcry, the people who took umbrage originally, were the ones who were anti this change. And then people were like, well, hang on a minute, let's be rational and reasonable. And then it sort of like shifted back once the more moderate people sort of got hurt.
And they've always been good Doctor Who, because I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Torchwood.
No.
What is it?
This doesn't seem to have gone over to America, because I've said this to other American people and they've been like, what? Because Torchwood is like a spin-off from Doctor Who.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the various spin-offs. I just never, I'm not a Whovian, so it's not like I'm invested in everything.
But basically, it's one of the few shows where the main hero of it is gay. And it was kind of, but again, the kind of not the point is that he's gay, he just happens to be. And where it's very it was kind of set up deliberately to be there to show people that that's possible and to kind of challenge people on that concept. And I thought that was a very positive thing.
And now we have a female captain for the new Star Trek series. And
yeah, Captain Giorgio, I believe.
Man, people are making a big issue out of that too. I was like, who freaking cares? You know, it's not. I don't know. I have my opinions about it, but really, it's just I don't care at all if it's a male or a female captain. It's not that. And then what upset me as well was having a black Jedi. Well, I mean, man, I don't want to give a spoiler for The Force Awakens, but I guess I just did. Anyway, he doesn't become the Jedi, and people were super upset that he was going to be the main character, some black guy becoming a Jedi. And I heard a lot of stuff here in Texas about it, and I didn't even realize that, you know, whenever I saw the trailer. It was such a minute detail to me. But I think it's good that we are challenging these stigmas, you know, when it comes to television. You know, why does Doctor Who have to be a guy? I'm definitely in the mix saying I don't care. That's my side of it. I don't care, as long as, you know, they keep coming out with some really cool stuff. I'm happy with it. So
yeah. And one of the interesting things, Rosemary, that you suggested was disabled people can't be successful, and that ties in real nicely with the Different Not Damaged collection. The whole idea behind that collection is that these are people with disabilities, and yet they're the main characters, and every one of them has their weaknesses, but then they also have the strength. And the idea was actually planted in my mind from a book called The Queen of Bones, written by Greg Zimmerman. And this is classic dystopian fiction. It's basically a world where solar flares are destroying everything. And this woman with rheumatoid arthritis can feel the solar flares 2 hours before they arrive, so she can get to safety. And that just blew my mind, that concept. And the more I read, I just fell in love with that. And so every time I write these stories, almost every single one of my stories to date have featured a disability of some sort. And the more that I write them, the more I realize, okay, I'm going to make these disabilities not just something that they fight, but something that ultimately help them to succeed. Like I'm writing a military story right now about this guy who has basically psoriasis on steroids, right? It's like this super thick skin. And he just got attacked by a snake that would have killed a normal person, but because of this psoriasis, it doesn't harm him. Just doing things like that, like using these disabilities in a way, or the disorders or diseases or whatever it is, in a way that shows that people can be heroes not only despite them, but thanks to them. I really like challenging that particular lie.
See, I absolutely love that, because that's exactly what I believe and what I do when I write, because there's a lot of disability fiction, which certainly has its place, but essentially what it's doing is it's talking about disability, and it's writing the story of disability. So there's that. And my son's autistic, and I have a lot of involvement with different disability charities in different ways. And it's been said to me quite a lot of times, why don't you write something about your experience with autism, or about being the mother of an autistic child? And I've basically said, no, I live with autism. I don't want to write about my experience of autism. I spend my life doing that. You know, my writing is an escape from, it is an escape from that, and it's something separate from that, and it's about my life even before that. It's a totally separate thing. And that's not really what I want to add to, because there's a lot of other people doing that very well. And when I was, the sort of spark for this whole series was my son, because he's an autistic savant. So he remembers everything that he sees. And
oh, wow.
My idea was to write a book about a savant. But I thought a vampire who had to live over centuries and remember everything, whether it was glories or horrors, whether that would be a blessing or a curse, but to also make a savant. And I also wanted to write an autistic vampire, who is in the first book as well. But I wanted that being a savant to be a talent. So a vampire that didn't just succeed because, in fact, he doesn't, because he's an amazing fighter or whatever, but because of his intelligence and an ability that's also very difficult for him, but is also something that his ability with numbers. And although it's not said, he's quite clearly different. The whole book is about difference, basically, in a whole range of ways. I mean, obviously, it's quite obvious from my background that that's probably going to be something that's really important to me is difference. But I didn't want it to be, oh, difference, you know, the way people are about it. I wanted it to be to show that the individual can be the person who goes on to save the world, or themselves, or whatever. And that is absolutely central to absolutely everything that I write. And I think fantasy in itself does that a lot. That is something very central to what fantasy does. And it's central to what being when you write about the anti-hero, in fact, does as well. Very often they are the misfit, outcast individual who's different. But I think it's such a valuable thing that you can do as a writer. Obviously writing a really interesting, gripping, fun, escapist book, but if at the same time you're doing something that is important as well, well, you can't ask for more as a writer, because you're going to be passionate about it also. So if you're writing something that you're passionate about, you're going to be writing a better book anyway.
Definitely. Very well said. Very well said. Another one of the lies that you suggested challenging is that old people are boring or old people can't be the hero. I have wanted to write like an octogenarian hero for so long. I just don't have the story, you know, to tell. But it's been such an interesting thing to see, like that was actually the concept behind this Ragged Heroes anthology that I'm putting together, is that you get rid of any heroes who are knights or warriors or kings or anybody who is competent to the extreme, and you put these sort of fringe characters. You know, you've got thieves, you've got beggars, you've got the crappiest soldiers, you've got I wanted to do old people, but I couldn't come up with a story for it. But just basically these fringe characters, and they're heroes in their own way. And they're not, you know, your typical knight in shining armor. They're ragged heroes in that sense. But just like showcasing these different things. And when I come up with the old person story, I'm going to write it.
Yeah, I think it's if we're talking about the kind of the lies that society tells. And we're talking again about the kind of, as you said, this kind of the fringe, and I think it's a really dangerous one in society, actually, and I think it's one that I'm always trying to think, I guess, because of challenging ourselves as writers as well. It's so easy to write hero. That's so easy. And it's like in a play, it's so easy to play certain characters, and it's what the fun thing is, playing the difficult character and then finding the motivation and heart and emotion of that difficult character, and then making the audience love you. And I love doing that with the harder characters to write, and that's what an anti-hero is, the harder character. And then what is it about them that's going to make the reader still love them despite the fact they should hate them? And I think with an older character, so what I did for Blood Dragons was, I hate the fact that with vampires, they're in love with 17-year-old girls when they're 200 years old.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Then it stops and leaves them with that 17 or 18-year-old, and you never see what happens. And you think, oh yeah, like they've stayed with them. And I wanted it to be a book that starts with the fact that the vampire has stayed with them and their true love, and they haven't turned them, they haven't elected them, all the way right up until they're 80, 90, and they're dying. And what would they have? Potentially they have dementia. And then it's about, I could then write about dementia as well, which is something I wanted to do. And then he's recounting their life. Because to me that hadn't been done. And it was something I would then be able to be writing about the old person, which is what I'm able to do. And I'd be able to compare memory, because he has a perfect memory. So he's not able to forget while she's forgetting. So I've got the two things. But also it was the idea that a vampire who's actually stayed with somebody all the way through, and what that would be like, as opposed to the typical vampire with a 17-year-old girl who probably stays with her for like 6 months, you know. But also the idea that, you know, we have long and fascinating lives, much longer than 21, and then suddenly our life stops. You know, our lives continue all the way through, because if we have the kind of lie in society that youth is like this idolized thing, and there's nothing.
it seems like you've really fleshed out your vampire. So I have a question that I've been really worried, like not bothered by. So let's say a vampire does find somebody he falls in love with, like a 25-year-old, you know, not like some 17-year-old girly, like you said. What happens when she's like 70 and he's like still looks like he's 20 something and he's like ripped and she's saggy? How do you keep? What do you? I mean, it seems like the only answer to that is the male vampire, the female vampire has to turn their lover. Because I was just looking up, Lie Society tells us like looks don't matter. They do.
Well, well, yeah, it depends. I mean, it depends if it's true love. Because in my one, he there's a line where he's joking. He says, ends up him being the toy boy, and then having to pretend that he's the son, and then having to pretend that he's the grandson.
Oh wow, yeah, that's. Oh, that's one of your scenes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that happens in the book, because what would you literally do as you're getting old, as you're with them essentially.
Wow. Yeah.
And the thing is that and then he ends up being basically like a carer, but because if you're with someone, love becomes less about passion, it becomes about companionship, and that's what true love is.
That makes sense. See, I didn't think about it that way. I thought, once they grew to like 65 or 70, they'd lose interest, or but does this really, well, you can't give away spoilers, but did she get mad when he joked about that?
The bit where okay, so there's a novella coming out in a box set for Valentine's Day. I can't give out too much, because the bit where the jokes are happening about her being the mother, basically, of him. Yeah, she does.
Yeah, I figured she'd get mad.
Yeah.
You would think being alive for 200 years, you'd learn.
Yeah.
How old is this guy?
He was 21 when he was elected into Bloodlife. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know what? We actually, for people who aren't familiar with your work, why don't you tell us a little bit about this series? Because I actually don't know anything about it either. So
it's called Rebel Vampires, and the first book is called Blood Dragons. And it's set in London, in a world where vampires are both predators and the prey. And they're a type of camouflaged predator. And their venom both paralyzes and stops the heart, which is how they're camouflaged essentially, and alongside the humans. And the main character is a vampire called Light, who is elected in the Victorian times. But then in the 1960s London, which is in the first book, he meets a human, and that's when everything kind of kicks off, because there's a big secret and horrifying experiments going on.
Oh, horrifying experiments, like on the vampires.
Well, yeah, it's a kind of in the first book, the vampires are the predators on the humans, but as the series go on, it all kind of gets reversed on them, and the vampires end up being the slaves to the humans. And then it kind of all gets reversed again by the third one, and it's all about whether it's going to get pulled out into the light essentially. But it's about two divided species, the blood lifers and the first lifers. Humans are called first lifers, and I was writing it at a time when, and we still are, very divided here in England. And I kind of wanted to explore the concept of, well, what if, in a very real way, we suddenly discovered there was another species, evolutionary wise, really did exist, who were evolved from, and I'm not going to actually say what they're evolved from, but because that's a spoiler, but are genuinely evolved alongside us, and we suddenly discovered they were real, and not in a lovely romantic way, but they really were there. And it's what happens from that point onwards. And so obviously some humans are going to be predatory and some aren't, but the humans are as bad as the blood lifers in my series.
And are we going to be doing our excerpt from Blood Dragons?
It's from Blood Renegades, the third one. The third book that was recently released.
Okay, cool. Andy, do you want to do the word of the day? I have one if you don't.
Okay, well, what's your word?
Mine is lambent.
Is what?
Lambent, 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 lambent.
Okay.
Means luminous. It's an adjective. Why are you smiling like that?
Use it in a sentence, Stevie.
Oh, wow, now that you put me on the spot. Okay, the way he was parading her around, there was, the car was lambent. I don't know. Actually, okay, the reason why I chose this word is because it's going to be the word for, it is going to be the new race that I'm creating for the 5th territory, the Lambents.
Ah.
So, yes, I've never heard of the word before, but it means luminous. That's probably why I can't use it in a sentence, because I've never heard it. Maybe you can figure one out.
Yes, softly bright or radiant, marked by lightness or brilliance, especially of expression, playing lightly on or over a surface.
The vampire's eyes were lambent.
Yes.
The white of his teeth were
lambent. Sunlight.
Lambent sunlight. Yes.
And I used my word already in our discussion.
Oh, did you? Was it Ooga Booga?
Umbrage.
Oh.
No, umbrage.
Umbrage. That's actually one of the beers I kind of like, or that I drink. Umbrage. Yeah. Okay, and what is umbrage?
It means to umbrage is offense or annoyance. So you take umbrage. You get offended or annoyed. You take umbrage at something. And so I like the word because it's usually something that like in my mind, it's used to describe like a Ponzi nobleman or just one of those petty bureaucrats. They take umbrage at things, just not like a manly anger, but just sort of that petty annoyance or getting offended super easily. Take umbrage.
You've always liked those posh words.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Why would they name a beer umbrage then if it's something annoying?
It may be spelled like Dolores Umbridge, which I believe is the bridge spelling instead of Umbrage.
That makes sense. Oh, and Rosemary, when you said London is currently split apart, what do you mean by that? Like politically?
Yeah, well, I think since we had Brexit, really.
Oh, yeah.
And I was writing it right over the time before we had the vote. And it was also at the time where there was a real feeling of certain people maybe shouldn't be here and people should go home, in inverted commas, which is actually kind of a quote that he will say, where Light says, oh, yeah, what, should I be going home? Or the Bloodlifers not allowed to be here, and someone goes to him, it's my London, not your London, and because he's a Bloodlifer, and he was like, hold on, I've been here for 200 years. So I kind of wanted to sort of parallel within the book the concept of the Bloodlifers and the First Lifers, that kind of mentality, and also write a London that is often not seen, the kind of very multicultural London that in reality exists, and maybe the side that the very non-touristy side that exists and that is there, and which I'm really proud of, and I wanted to show that.
Yeah, whenever I went to London, I was in one of those black cabs. I love those things too. They're so knowledgeable, and I actually said, take us somewhere touristy, and he took us to this side street, and it was just bars, just all these bars, and these people off of work, and they're still wearing their suits and ties, and they're sitting outside with their pints of beer, and I was so cool. I just love that side of the. That's all we got to see was something close to our hotel, but I honestly don't know a whole lot about English culture, but that was. We didn't expect to go to London either, so I didn't get to do a whole lot of research beforehand. But the black cab thing took me by surprise. Oh, and I got to do a tea time, I think, where they bring out those massive things of like dessert, and you just sit there and eat everything, and you have like 2 or 3 things of tea. Do you know what I'm talking about? Is that called a tea party?
Yes.
Or is it tea time?
Do you mean when they bring out lots of little sandwiches and scones and?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What is that called?
Yeah, tea. Yeah, afternoon tea.
Is that what y'all do every day? Y'all just bring out these
Yeah,
huge things?
You call it afternoon tea, yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, that was interesting. I definitely left there with my like 3-layer tray of desserts and stuff like completely gone. So, and today's excerpt is going to be on book 3.
Yeah, Blood Renegades.
Okay, Andy, did you want to get to that now, or do you want to continue discussing the topic?
No, let's do it.
Okay, because I need to find it real quick, because it always gets mixed up in the emails.
Yeah. Rosemary, how many characters are in here? Is it just the main character Ruby, or is it 2 characters?
This is the excerpt with the
cannibal tarantula.
The cannibal tarantula. I'd just like to say about this that I'm arachnophobic. I'm
you
really
really?
frightened of spiders. So you know about including your own phobias. So this is why in the 3rd book, one of the recurring themes is spiders. Not in reality that there are spiders, but is things to do with spiders and to do with plots and webs and being caught in webs and people trying to trick each other and themes. So yeah, this is why this is my fear in it. There are 2 people, no, three, but one of them only says 1 line if you're talking, and the narrator.
All right, well, I'll do the narrator.
Andy, could you send me the excerpt, please? I don't have it.
Stevie.
I have an image of a. I have the image of Fantasy Rebel.
There you go. I just emailed it to you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I will start reading the narrator stuff, and Rosemary, you can prompt Stevie when he's coming in.
Well, yeah, like you sent it to me and it doesn't. What the heck? Hold on. Yeah, see, I don't know why it's not sending it to me.
You have to probably click the thing that shows the rest of the email content, like the back email content.
I did.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you reply to an email or did you send a new one?
I will. I forwarded the email. I'll send you the new one right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because all my emails with you are like jumbled all together.
Yes. All right. So, the cannibal tarantula. That's what they called him. The blood lifer I met one night in Southwark. Met? Maybe too strong a word. The tarantula was quite a blood lifer tourist attraction back in the 60s. He nested in the crypt beneath Southwark's cathedral choir. I'd crossed London Bridge, prowling through derelict warehouses, bombed out in the Second World War and left to rot, home now to squatters and junkies. Ruby would have delighted in exploring such horrors back when she first authored me. But by then, she'd become distracted by her brother Erald. Money and power. Plus, blood sharing with him. Let's not forget that. I'd been left that summer 68 to wander London. Alone. There was always going to be danger in that. I jumped the last 2 steps, landing in a fog of bone and stone dust. I spluttered. It caught in my nostrils, stinking of decay and the merry dance of death. Just my kind of joint. I bowed my head under the low arch, peering into the deep black. Corroded lead coffins lined the crypt, which was sealed to humans. Blood lifers had our own way in. Sweat trickled down my neck, bleeding hell. It was like being baked in a stone oven.
Is this me?
Sure.
Yeah.
Am I the vampire?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Tarantula, I don't fancy playing the fly, but I've come for tea, yeah?
No reply. The faintest rustling at the far reaches of the crypt. Sighing, I swaggered toward the sounds, which became dry snaps, cracks, and scraping. which had my fangs aching. I needed my bleeding nut examined. An albino web of bones tangled out of the gloom.
Bloody hell.
A bloodlifer crouched inside the white cage, hiding in the shadows, but it didn't look up. Snap. Its long hair covered its mush, but its industrial fingers never paused. Crack. A femur was shaped, pushed into the intricate framework of the web. Scrape. Just for a moment, glowing peepers darted to mine and then away. Yet although it was as grubby as any street urchin, it was dressed. He was dressed. Like a toff in striped gray boater jacket and dove gray waistcoat. His socks stuck out comical grimy as he worked hunched over. It was as if someone had dressed him up doll-like to keep up appearances.
Shame of it is, he won't feed from first lifers. Christ in heaven.
If I hadn't been so distracted by the sight of a bloke building his own human bone cage while dressed like he was watching a 20s boat race, I'd have sensed the blood lifer sidling up behind me and shimmering in an emerald beaded flapper dress. She was the type of bint who I would have both idolized and too much of a mouse to raise my gaze to in first life. Her Majesty grabbed you by the bollocks. If I wasn't already leashed by Ruby, she'd have collared me. The flapper caressed my shoulder, tracing over the gold ace of spades on the back of my leathers. Then she stroked lower between my legs. I jumped.
It's a damn bother, but he needs blood lifer. Blood, I mean, and he won't feed from me.
The anguish in the flapper's peepers made a lie of the studied boredom in the author's words, as well as her wandering hands, which were crawling over my arse like she was laying claim to it. How many times had she repeated this routine, like the sideman in a freak show? When the flapper pressed her palm to the web and a bone clattered to the stone floor, I flinched.
Will you feed him? You must be off your trolley.
The flapper's mask slipped. Such fire burned she could blaze continents to ash. I took a step back. Then her mush was blank again. She swung her pearl necklace in tense arcs, as if winding a hidden weapon.
Don't be too horribly wet. Just put your arm through.
At the sounds of the clattering bone, the tarantula had become still. His nut twisted toward us. Then he sniffed, as if scenting the air. The bird had circled me, predator-like. The crafty bugger was now between me and the way out of the crypt. How voluntary exactly was this donation? My black t-shirt was sticking to me like a damp layer of skin, but I wasn't taking off my jacket. Not in this place, no bloody way. I inched my arm toward the cage. When, however, was I ever frightened of being bitten? I thrust my arm into the web with my hand tightly fisted because I didn't want my fingers to look like delicious nibbles. A scuffling scuttle, and the tarantula was there. His warm breath over my tender wrist, right over the pulse point. Blood sharing was, bugger it, intimate, and I was about to break one of those rules with... It was beautiful. His black hair hanging in matted waves over a mush as pale as his bone prison. And his violet peepers were blind. The tarantula was so thin his ribs showed through like knives. His delicate fingers were searching, smoothing over my wrist in quick little motions.
The darkness.
He muttered.
The black feeds. 3, 3, 3.
Each 3 lit up like spectacular explosions in my brain, my magical number. Shuddering, I breathed.
Have yourself a good nosh, mate. Looks like you need one.
Tarantula startled, like he hadn't expected to be spoken to. I wonder how long it had been since he had been. I don't know why I felt the Nancy need to reassure the stranger. Why did I give a rat's arse to be shriveled to nothing in his web? Yet the idea of being trapped tugged at me with new feelings. That's why, when he sank in his fangs deep, I hissed. But then, just as fast, I was lost. I closed my peepers. The steady suck, touch of his lips, and swirl of his venom. It was firework in heaven glorious. I was caught in the bond, every molecule alive with it. Sought it, no hunter feed can equal blood sharing. The tarantula, he was touched. Some of us don't survive the rebirth whole or put a match to our souls after. Else the snowflake patterns of difference were there to start with, and the blood life merely amplified. But what I couldn't figure, as I swam in the bubbling flow of our bonding, was whether he caged himself or been caged. And if he truly was touched, or whether this treatment of him, and didn't I bloody remember it well from Bedlam, had turned him touched. The dark. I smiled, sinking deeper into the bond, imagining Ruby's expression if I brought him back to advance with me. If I saved him. When suddenly, agonizingly, the bond was broken. I shot up. The author was standing next to me, a human rib, gory crimson still grasped in her mitt. She dropped it, clattered, so loud in the silence. Woozy, it took me a moment to... Tarantula lay on his back in the bone cage, staring up at the stone ceiling of the crypt, with his unseeing violet peepers. Red crept out of his waistcoat, over his heart, where the bitch had shanked him. I'd been a distraction, a toy to dangle while she did in her own elected. I don't know whether it was the blood sharing, but I was shaking.
He came back wrong.
The flapper whispered, staring down at the boy she'd authored, then murdered.
The Order of Electors told me, but I thought it no account. I stole them away before they could. I hoped that would be enough.
I didn't hesitate, and she didn't stop me. When I rammed the same rib through the flapper's heart, she fell next to the cage like an emerald butterfly. Broken, the same as the kid she'd authored. Her pearls spilled as if shining tears into the crimson. She stretched out to try and touch the tarantula's fingers with her own, but couldn't through the layers of human bone. How's the bleeding irony? It turns out you can't hide in the shadows. You're not safe in your cage. And the dangers in life, as well as from across the divide of the species. You know what I learned that day? There's no way to tell who's the predator and who's the prey. End of scene. Wow.
So well written.
Yeah.
Rosemary, I really wish you would have read it because it's obvious that it should have been read by someone English. So,
thank you. Okay.
I refuse to do the English accent though, because when you're here, no, but maybe when you're not here, I would have tried. But Andy, you could have done it too, man.
Not in front of Rosemary. No,
okay, good.
Sir.
So we're in agreement. No one wants to do it in front of you, Rosemary. Andy's actually pretty good at it. So what is a bint? That was a bint. Is that like a bad word for a woman or something? A bint?
Yeah, a bint can be an effect, either said as a slightly insulting word for a woman, or it can be a slightly affectionate way if you're a Londoner for a woman.
It sounds like slag.
As in you silly bint.
Oh, it can be affectionate, huh? I don't want to go to London and use it. I think I'll yeah.
Encouraging you to say that to someone you don't know. I'm just saying.
Okay. So you have to know them to use bint.
Yeah.
Bint. And sod. I learned sod when I was in London.
He also has a very particular way of speaking because he was elected in Victorian times, but also he had a kind of second rebirth in inverted commas because he had a very traumatic experience in the First World War. And he really kind of therefore had a second rebirth in the 1960s. So a lot of his language is from the 1960s, is London 1960s. So a lot of the way the book is written is deliberately a kind of combination of Victorian and 1960s London words as well.
And you wrote it in first person, right?
Yes.
See, I like writing in first person. The only thing is when I go back to, I'm writing the sequel to my first book, which is in third person. I actually just yesterday wrote 2 pages in first person. What did I do?
Actually, it's in second person. It's really in second person because he writes it directly to Kathy because he's talking to her as she's dying. So he actually says you. So it's actually in the you form. As he's saying YOU form. And in fact, all of them, well, the second one, because it's written as a slave journal, the second book is the Slave Journal of Light. So his owner, Grace, who buys him, he's a human who buys him, forces him to write a slave journal because the idea, and slave journals exist, the idea of a slave journal is that you've got someone's body, you've got their mind, if you force them to write a slave journal, all your thoughts down, then you've got complete control over them. But of course, he's a complete unreliable narrator, and he then manipulates her by knowing that she's reading this diary. He manipulates her back.
Yeah.
That's then written in the you form as well, because he's then speaking to it's kind of a very complex form because he's speaking to theoretically himself, but he's then speaking to her because he knows that she's reading it. Yeah, but then he's kind of speaking to you as the reader as well. But he's again writing in the youth form.
And one last question. Whenever you're writing, since you're a playwright, do you ever find yourself like, do you ever find like attributes of playwriting into your, do you find it in your writing, in your novels?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think playwriting is a really useful background. I love dialogue. I love dialogue, and I love voices. My big thing is voice. So with Verbal Vampires, Light's voice came before any of the rest of it. So his voice was in my head. I knew him before I knew the book, and I always have a really powerful voice for short stories in particular as well. So I know how it's going to be, and then it's getting, but what world are they going to come into, and what plot am I going to then build that? How am I going to frame it? And I think a lot of that comes from the play background. But I think there's more to it than that, because in plays or when you're acting, it's motivation. You're constantly looking for, well, where's the emotion, and where's the motivation, where's the psychology, what's the psychology of this? And I mean that's really important, because that's what you're doing as a writer.
Yeah, I just finished a 12-hour book on dialogue, and one of the big things I took from it was you need action behind each piece of dialogue. And already I can tell just having that in the back of my brain while I write has made a tremendous difference with the quality of my dialogue. So it seemed kind of similar to what you just said about the emotions and stuff like that. Andy, do you have any questions for Rosemary?
No, I'm just happy we had her on.
Yeah, I think you're the first playwright that we've had on the Fantasy Fiends podcast. So
fantastic.
Now all you have to do is turn blood dragons into a play. So.
Oh, that would be difficult. I could see it as a movie, but that would be fun. But that would be a very frightening play.
I'd go see it, definitely. I don't think I've ever seen a scary play done before.
No.
So,
no, well, maybe it should be the first one.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's it for me too. So, Rosemary, how can your fans and new fans find you?
I have a website called rosemarysjohns.com. And you can also find me on Facebook at Rosemary Johns. I'm trying to think of my own Facebook now. Rosemary and Johns. Rosemary and Johns. Yeah, Rosemary and Johns is my Facebook. But rosemarysjohns.com is my website.
Oh wow, I love the animation for blood dragons with the fire in the Gears movie. How did you do that? It's so freaking awesome.
A really kind other author who's far cleverer at tech than me made that for me.
I'm so jealous. That'd be so cool to have. Andy, you got to go check it out.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I want that for mine. Man, you make me want to go rebuild my website. Okay, well, I will go ahead and end this podcast. We want to thank everybody out there for watching or viewing, depending on if you're on YouTube or Podbean or iTunes, whichever. We really thank you for that. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That really helps us out. Please go and check out Rosemary Johns' books. They are on Amazon. The first one in the series is Blood Dragons. And yeah, and so next week, Andy, who do we have?
We have the amazing Logan Keys.
Logan Keys. All right.
She's a dark fantasy / horror author.
Great. So we have 2 dark fantasy authors in a row. That's our cup of tea, right, Andy?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody out there. Rosemary, thank you so much for being on the show and staying up late to be with us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. All right. We will see you guys next week, Thursday, same usual time.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye.